first, when I was.
Yeah.
But certainly where the transformation you're referring to now, it sort of did hit some hiccups, doesn't it? And I think we mentioned earlier this notion, this idea that I talk about in the book about subject-object, where the leaders were subjecting the organization to change, and the object of the change was you guys over there, you guys down there. But even with this big consultancy that was brought in, there was a small mention, in small words, about leadership development. And yet, what happened there? Because, from what I could gather, there wasn't very much of it done. And hence, the leaders weren't the object of the change at that point. They still wanted to subject people to the change.
I think that's just super important, Mark. I think I was talking about the book I read about crises,
oh, yes.
So the book Upheaval, written by Jared Diamond, who's tremendous. It's a tremendous book, but it's about nations seen through the eyes of a psychologist. He's not a psychologist, his wife is, he's just a polymath. But he says that, and he looked at various nations, Germany, Japan, and Korea and other places, and talked about their recent history through all of the nations that had a crisis. And, Germany being, what's interesting, and you're a psychologist, so you know these things, Mark, but apparently, the crisis is the thing. And the question is what happens after the crisis. And actually change has to occur.
Yeah.
And if change doesn't occur, which reflects on the pre-crisis situation and resolves it, you don't move on. And so he relates that in Germany, the Germans moved on from the Second World War by really dealing with the pre-war crisis and going and setting up memorial centres for the Holocaust that they took all their school children to, and genuinely repenting. And Germany's great success as a modern country is because it dealt with its crisis. So, and I was riffing on this, Mark, but I feel like this is the case for organizations, is you need the crisis. And if you don't fight the battle of Agile, and then end up post-crisis having dealt with the pre-crisis issues, which I think are crises of management, actually, management and leadership.
Yes.
You won't move forward. You'll still have, and that's what would otherwise happen, is you'll have the same people in charge. It's okay with the same people, but the same unchanged people in charge, wondering why nothing's really changed. It's probably, this is probably pretty normal. Anyways, I think this is what goes on in a lot of Agile transformation. It tells you, of course, that's a very tough task, because you've got to be a very determined leader to change all the many interested parties around you. It's hard. They won't be happy about it.
Oh, absolutely. But they
might not be happy about it.
You see, but that's the point, and it's rather subtle, isn't it? The idea that the leader has to change people is a bit of a misnomer, because they can't change anyone. I often say to people, look, I'm probably one of the world's best coaches, and that's not being too over dramatic, but actually I've never changed anybody. What I do is I ask people to have conversations. We have dialogue about change, and then they see, well, what change do I want? So and sometimes I hate this word, empower people to go off and actually make the change that they want. So culture change happens within the teams. And
yes.
There's never one culture for the whole organization. There's multiple cultures. And then asking the team to say, well, look, how do you want to evolve your culture? What's important to you? And the leader, like you said earlier, provides the platform, provides the mechanisms. They put in place the correct systems, processes, and everything else, the stuff that they really have control of in the organization. And I say control because they really do control it. Yeah. So hence, subjecting people to the change, it has to be done in a different way. And the idea is that if they can put themselves forward and say, again, you were one of the few people I've come across in my career, Edward, who actually had their own coach that was actually helping them through the time of the change in the organization. I remember you introduced me to a very nice lady whose name I can't remember. But But it was very, very important, I thought, because here was I speaking to you thinking, well, look, Edward, I can't coach you because I'm working for you, but who's your coach? I've got a coach. Oh, whoa, really? Awesome. Because again, like I say, one hand, the number of people who do that say, look, I'm the mechanism of change. I need to change myself. And I understand that I've got to get better if my team's going to get better. And then you become that mentor, that paradigm that people would want to look at and shift towards, to say, well, look, if they're changing, then change is good enough for them. It's good enough for me.